Welcome to part 2. In part 1, we talked a little bit about Mao and the Second Taiwan Crisis and how that crisis basically ended on the concept of retaining the idea of one China. And now enter the Soviets. Early on, the Soviets and the Chinese Communist parties were like best buds. But after a honeymoon period, conflicts and tensions began to develop. Together, these tensions would lead to what we now call the Sino-Soviet Split, one of the biggest geopolitical events in the second half of the 20th century. People continue to argue over what exactly happened to create the split. I'll write more about it later. But like with any divorce, it seems to be the case that there was no one real reason, but instead many little ones. Here's one of them. The hullabaloo of the Second Taiwan Crisis, as well as Mao's cavalier attitude regarding worldwide nuclear destruction, led the Soviets to rationally conclude that maybe it is not such a great idea to transfer nuclear weapons to the Chinese. They canceled a forthcoming delivery of a prototype atom bomb in 1959, pissing off the Chinese. This set the table for further tensions. In steps Nikita Khrushchev, first Secretary of the Soviet Union. Roughly speaking, and I'm skipping over a lot of detail here, Khrushchev came to power wanting to lead the Soviet Union towards a policy of peaceful coexistence with the West. One of the stumbling blocks towards this goal was Germany, at the time divided after the whole Nazi thing. Khrushchev wanted a permanent resolution to this divided scenario, including possibly international recognition of the two Germanys. During a conversation with Eisenhower in September 1959, Khrushchev pushed for this resolution. Eisenhower and the United States had, up until then, publicly said that Germany must be united again to prevent it from being an indefinite hotbed of conflict. Khrushchev pointed out to Eisenhower the hypocrisy of this statement. After all, didn't the United States support the idea of two Chinas with Mao and Chiang? Eisenhower conceded the point, and a tacit understanding seemed to have been reached. If Khrushchev can sell Mao on two Chinas, then Eisenhower was open to two Germanys. A few months later, Khrushchev touched down in Beijing for talks with Mao and the Chinese Communist elite. He started out the talks in a good mood, but the Soviet leader knew that he had a tough sell ahead of him, and that good mood quickly dissipated. That is because Mao was certainly, really not open to the idea of two Chinas. When Khrushchev brought up the idea in a face-to-face meeting, Mao was taken aback. For one thing, he said the China situation was not at all like the Germany situation, because China is much larger than Taiwan. China has a population of 650 million, Taiwan has a population of 7 million. While West and East Germany, West has 50 million, East Germany has 18 million at the time. And China helped win World War II, by the way. Germany lost. Why should China agree to be divided? My experiences with angry customers and my girlfriend have generally taught me that this is where you change the subject. But Khrushchev soldiered on. He brought up a case from Soviet history, that of the Far Eastern Republic. A while ago, Lenin created the Far Eastern Republic in the far east of the Soviet Union, and Lenin recognized its sovereignty. Keep in mind that this republic was established on the territory of the Soviet Union. It was unbelievable, but Lenin temporarily put up with this. Later, as it expired, the Far Eastern Republic merged with the Soviet Union. The well-read Chinese contingent were also familiar with this historical situation. Mao was appalled. As far as the creation of the Far Eastern Republic is concerned, and also the fact that at some point Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia were separated from the Soviet Union, you should keep in mind that in these cases, there was no foreign intervention. It was a shit show, kind of like the YouTube comments under some of my videos. It was not even the worst part of this now fateful meeting that came over the Soviet response to the just recently occurred Sino-Indian border conflict, but that's for later. This would later become one of the firing points that the Chinese threw at the Soviets after the Sino-Soviet split was complete, but they seem to have misunderstood the context at the time of why Khrushchev would bring this point up. The Soviet leader was thinking about Germany, not about offending China. On the Russian side, Khrushchev and the rest of the Soviet leadership would complain in frustration about the Chinese leadership's nervousness and touchiness at any sort of criticism whatsoever. Khrushchev would also add that Mao was creating a, quote, cult of personality. That when he is speaking to Mao, he felt like he is, quote, speaking with Stalin, is listening to Stalin. The Sino-Soviet split was on.